Good evening, everybody. Welcome to our September 9th Planning, Economic Development and Land Use Committee meeting. Brian, would you please do the roll call?
Valloran.
Here.
Adams. Clark. Hoey.
Here.
Zamer.
Here.
4 present from the committee. We are also joined by Councilmember Flynn.
Okay, excellent. Can you go with the staff that's here too, please?
We're joined by City Clerk Shaniqua Jackson, Research Counsel Jake Iceland, Mayor's Chief of Staff David Gallen, Director of Planning Bradley Glass, Principal Planner Avi Epstein, and I believe a Assistant Corporation Counsel Jason Thomas.
Okay, thank you. So we've got 2 things on our agenda today, the USDO annual report as well as ordinance 1753-24. We're going to start with the USDO report from the planning department. I want to thank you both for being here. I know it's a lengthy report. Is it possible to give us basically the highlights and the changes or any recommendations for changes to speed up the process?
Yep. Yeah,
Thank you.
We'll go through that as quickly as we can. All right, so thank you for opportunity to present on the USDO annual reports. So as I believe everyone knows, the USDO is just the evolution of the prior zoning codes for the city, where we've now included other ordinances and regulations under kind of the same document to make the regulations more efficient and more streamlined. And within the development review procedures, kind of just touching on that we have different levels of review, from things that have limited discretion, just like a development plan review, or things that might have an elevated discretion, like a conditional use permit or perhaps a demolition review. And then also some of the built-in flexibility and relief that could be provided, such as through administrative adjustments, variances, historic property hardship waivers and such, and then policy decisions such as text amendments to the USDO or zoning map amendments, designation of historic landmarks or local historic districts. And this is just I know it's a little hard to see, but this is the development review procedures table, where it just outlines the various entities on or the application types on the left-hand side, and then the types of notice requirements and the various reviewing authorities, whether that be particular personnel within the city, departments, land use boards, or the Common Council itself. As for the development plan reviews, so there, we have various thresholds, as we can kind of see on the bottom left-hand corner here, where there's different things that meet the thresholds for a minor development plan review, which is done, reviewed and signed off by staff, and then things that are under the major category, which would go before the planning board. This is something that we're looking to kind of revisit a little bit and to amend accordingly based on some of the applications we've seen this past year and some of the years prior. Just a recap on the development standards, there are various sections within the USDO itself that go over dimensional standards, parking, landscaping, building and streetscape design, signage. So there's a lot of different standards that we reviewed and that we have kind of indicated some findings on in the report itself. As far as the development plan reviews go, in 2023, we had 55 individual development plan review applications. This was an increase from the prior years. We can see in 2022, we had 22 applications. This is largely the result of 2 scattered site projects that have combined total, I believe, of 31 individual development plan review applications. So if we were to look at just overall development projects that kind of meet the various triggers, we would be at 30 as opposed to the 55. But those projects, like we're talking about, if we look at like Clinton Ave Phase 3, has, I believe, 9 individual development plan review projects. In terms of the outcomes that we've seen for those applications, and this is just for 2023, 51% were approved. We have about 45 still under review, as a lot of those projects were scattered site and required additional information, and we're working with the applicants on various constraints to make the project work. And then we have 2 applications which were withdrawn. Similar to other years, the intent of a development plan review is to really make sure that a project is in full compliance with the USDO. So throughout the whole process, it's really working with the applicant, various departments to get that project in line where it's in full compliance with the USDO and other city codes, which is really why you don't see a lot of development plan review projects that are denied by the planning board. It is much more likely that an application would be withdrawn for a proposed project once they've kind of gotten the indication that the obstacles or the elements that they can't either obtain waivers for or can't work around just make the project unviable. So that's why we've historically seen more projects withdrawn than you would find projects being denied. This is just, I know it's hard to see on here, but a development plan review project map for 2023, so really scattered throughout the city. And then the 2 inset maps are, the one on the top would be for Clinton Ave Phase 3, and the one on the bottom right that has the blue dots, those are the South End Scattered Site Project, which would be 62 separate structures of infill development. Here we're just looking at the new construction versus renovation over time. So, you can see how it certainly fluctuates over the years. In 2023, we had approximately 1.2, a little over 1.2 million square feet of new construction. This is the floor area that's calculated that we're able to measure through the applications we receive, and about 357,000 square feet of renovated or rehabbed floor area. Now, the numbers that we have might not be fully indicative of all the projects out there, because not all rehab or renovation projects necessarily meet the triggers for review by the planning department or the planning board. But this typically covers the larger projects that we see throughout the city. For waiver requests, so a waiver can be requested from various elements of the USDO, with the exception of the sign portions and the dimensional standards, so like building height. We've seen waivers requested since 2020, and we have them tracked here. And the yellow bars here are indicating the applications, the request for waivers that we've received in 2023. A waiver is you're only able to submit a waiver for relief from a provision of the USDO if it's in conjunction with a development proposal or development project. So this is not just like a small one-off type that would probably be more likely to be something like an area variance. These are associated with larger development projects themselves. In almost all cases, so 63 out of 64 cases, the request for a waiver was granted. That's typically because the request, it's the applicant showing why they're unable to meet certain restrictions or provisions of the code, typically because of the uniqueness of a particular site. And then just looking here kind of at the breakdown for an example of parking, where we see most of the waivers granted for parking have to do with like the location of the parking or various setbacks of the parking, landscaping, and so on. Here we have conditional use permits. So mapping out the various conditional use permits throughout the city, kind of broke them down to different categories of civic and institutional, commercial, industrial, and residential. The review criteria for the conditional use permit is spelled out within the code. That's what you'll find on the right-hand side of this image here. This remains the same. conditional use permits over time. So we'll see in 2017, well, in June 2017, when the USDO was adopted, we had 6 applications. It's kind of, varied over time, but stayed relatively level, and we had 14 applications for a conditional use permit in 2023. Out of the 75 conditional use permit applications we received since the adoption of the USDO, 63 of them were approved, 4 were denied, 7 were withdrawn, and 1 is still under review. We broke down the various conditional use permits by the type and the zoning district. And we look at the different types of conditional use permits. We can also place them into other categories like commercial, which had 34, residential had 32, civic institutional was 7, and industrial had 3. And that's over the course since the adoption of the USDO, so 2017 through the end of 2023. And what we've called out here is just some of the uses where we think there could be revisions to the code to allow for an easier process for some of these uses. So some of the uses we see here are dwelling townhouse and a dwelling 2-unit detached, where conditional use permits were required. I'll jump into that on the next slide here. So a large reason for the number of conditional use permits for those 2 uses, again, the dwelling townhouse and the dwelling 2-unit detached, were because of requests for residential conversions, which is when someone wants to increase the number of dwelling units within a detached or townhouse dwelling. An example would just be converting a single unit to a 2-unit or a 2-unit to a 3-unit. Over 25% of all of our conditional use permits were for adding another dwelling unit, and it was specifically impacting the zoning districts of the R2 and RT. All but one of those applications was approved, with the lone denial being because the application didn't meet the use-specific standards. Over that same time, the number of public comments were minimal in this case. There were none for those specific requests. And if we look at the use-specific standards, many uses under the permitted use table have assigned a use-specific standard to them. Some of them are just reserved, where there's not necessarily a use-specific standard set just yet, but when we look at residential conversions, there's a couple of things that are already called out in the code. 1, that it must meet the minimum lot area. 2, that it can't exceed the number of units allowed in that zoning district. That there's a minimum 800 square feet of improved gross floor area is required for each unit. That's for a detached dwelling. For townhouses, there's a couple other requirements, that the units have to occupy a minimum of 80% of a story or have a minimum 1,000 square feet of gross floor area per unit. Or that a building story has to be a minimum of 50% above the finished grade along the front of the property where that dwelling is to be occupied. And then lastly, it also requires enclosed trash storage for a townhouse. So what we believe would help a lot in this case is more reliance on a use-specific standard could relieve the necessity for a conditional use permit in this case. So if someone's adding a unit and it's allowed, we could revise the permitted use table so that it's permitted as of right, so long as they meet the use-specific standards. In the cases that we've reviewed and those cases that have come before the planning board, they've all been approved as they meet those standards, with the one that was denied simply not meeting the standards that are currently set forth. As for area variances, we had 47 area variances in 2023. This is an increase from 2022, and we had 30. There was, this is a overall decrease from pre-USDO numbers, where the average per year was about 115 variances. However, it's still, at this point, we are seeing a slight increase in the number of variances. And as far as area variances go, there's a balancing test that the Board of Zoning Appeals has to weigh for these applications, with the review criteria listed here on the right. As we look at the area variances by the zoning district, and this is specific to 2023, we can see that on the tall bar there on the right-hand side is the MUCH district, or the Mixed Use Community Highway District. This is largely the portion of Central Avenue with a lot of the car dealerships. The MUCH accounted for 47% of the area variances in 2023. This was largely a result of the current sign code. which had been amended in 2021. When we look at the area variances by the zoning district, since the adoption of the USDO, we see residential districts with about 28% of them, mixed-use commercial districts with 66%, and industrial districts with 6%. Diving deeper into the area variances, we can see here, again, this is just for 2023, but that signage took up the majority of what the applications submitted were for, relief from the current sign code. And just breaking that down a little bit further on the table on the right, you'll see area variance applications for signage. This is from 2021 through 2023, with most of the applications being to have a larger sign area or sign size than what's currently allowed under the code. That would be 36 applications. The number of signs per frontage with 15 applications, and the maximum sign height, that'd be for like a freestanding sign with 12 applications in that time frame. So what we would be looking to do is currently we'd like to bring forward proposals that we're working on to amend the USDO as it relates to signage, provide a little more flexibility in the code, while also providing clarity on things like the sign area measurement and aligning the code so that it's a little bit more specific to parcels that might have a larger frontage, or that might just have might have a larger, building and other structures on said parcel. Next, we just have the use variances. So this has really stayed the same since the adoption of the USDO. So you'll see on the chart here, we had, a number of use variances with a peak just over 80 use variances in 1 year. I believe it was 2007, where we are now down to 0 use variance applications since the adoption of the USDO. It's really just largely due to the new code aligning the uses better to the underlying built environment and providing a little more flexibility and even allowing for conditional use permits where necessary, as opposed to having something not permitted as of right. So it's reduced the need for a use variance in that time. So no changes there. Next, just looking at some of our historic districts. Again, here's just a map of those local historic districts, because the local ones are what we would have purview for reviewing. And that would be under a certificate of appropriateness. So just as a recap of that, so typically there are kind of minor and major ones. So a minor certificate of appropriateness can be reviewed by staff, and it's really a replacement in kind of materials or minor alterations and repairs. For major alterations or modifications, which might be new construction or demolition or requests to install elements or materials that are not historically appropriate for that building, that would go before the Historic Resources Commission. When we look at the COA applications in the given time frame, so there's been approximately 1,200 COA applications since the adoption of the USDO. The majority of these, at 79%, are minor category, with 21% being major. And then just looking at 2023, we had 97 certificate of appropriateness applications. This is a pretty large decrease in the number of applications compared to several years prior, where we had about 350 plus in 2 years. So we've made some changes to the code and some interpretations in terms of what, given materials and things like that, to kind of ease some of the restrictions and working with homeowners and other applicants to get through the process to obtain a building permit and a certificate of appropriateness where necessary. So here we have some of the other reviews. These ones that I'm going to go through weren't touched on in the report itself, but they do play a large role in the department's everyday functions, as well as having an impact on some of the other projects and submittal types that we've gone through. So here we have zoning compliance certificates. We've had quite a few of them, about I believe it's 1,700 since the adoption of the USDO. We had 273 in 2023. These letters are typically requested by your financial institution. It's often associated with when a buyer or seller is looking to buy or sell property. They're looking for verification that the property is zoned, accordingly, and that the current use is allowed. And that ties into the next type of review that we have here. This is the determinations of status of nonconformity. And this is something that was we've added to the code in the end of 2021. So our DSN applications here that we see on the map, which there were 18 of, started at the beginning of 2022. So this map shows so 18 applications from 2022 through 2023. And essentially what this is looking to verify that a particular use is either legally nonconforming or that it's not legally nonconforming. And in terms of what is outlined in the code and both what we require to review the request to formally say that something is legally nonconforming, we look at photographs, utility bills, leases, building permits, and lots of historic directories. Currently, this process is a little bit inefficient in the time it takes to go through the process, because someone would have to go through submitting a zoning compliance certificate first, and then once they go through that, receive that letter, that's typically when they would reach out to us saying that they need a determination of status of nonconformity. And that takes a minimum of 14 days because the chief planning official has to wait a minimum of 14 days from the time the notices are provided. So for public notice and for council to provide any feedback on that project before we're allowed to formally issue that letter. So that sometimes that comes up with timing constraints, especially as people are looking to close on properties. So we're just looking to streamline that process. I know we've talked with Councilmember Valorant about this as well. So just trying to streamline the process here as best we can, but still making sure that we review the same type of documentation and apply the same standards and criteria that we would with the code written as it currently is. Some of the other planning department reviews that we have, I'm just kind of outlining here, we have 152 demolition plan reviews. These are all since the adoption of the USDO. We had 22 demolition plan reviews in 2023, 189 lot modifications. A lot modification is specific. It's essentially if you're looking to split a lot, say you have one lot, you want to split it into two or consolidate two lots. So we had 36 of those in 2023. 10 administrative adjustments, however, there haven't been any issued since 2021. 18 zoning map amendments, otherwise known as like a rezoning. We had 5 of those in 2023. And then 19 zoning text amendments or amendments to revise or update the USDO. And we had 4 of those in 2023. So just kind of to recap some of the main points here, we'll be looking to bring forward our proposed amendments to the sign code within the USDO to reduce that the number of applications we have to have go before the Board of Zoning Appeals and to create more flexibility in the sign code. We'd also be looking to revisit the determinations of status of nonconformities to make that process more efficient. Development plan review thresholds and procedures. So within the USDO, there are a set of essentially triggers that kind of indicate whether a project requires review at all as a development plan review, and then even if it does, whether that be placed in the major or minor category. So we'd like to make some amendments there, again, kind of creating more efficiencies and creating more known path for development. And then in line with that, looking to make revisions to the procedural summary chart that would align with the different departments or personnel that would review certain applications. The current one is kind of based on some of the way that the city had been set up in the past, so we'd be looking to just bring it up to date, but also update and revise a few things that we believe were erroneously placed within the table when the code was finalized. We'd recommend utilizing use-specific standards to relieve the need for some of the conditional use permits. Just going back to one of the previous slides and looking at the USDO report itself, there's a couple of uses that you would see kind of stick out that generate a larger percentage of those conditional use permits. A lot of the times that has to do with the request to add a dwelling unit to a particular property. So we'd be looking to utilize the use-specific standards where they exist, or to bolster them, or to create use-specific standards if they don't currently exist. And then lastly, looking to revise the process for the development standard waivers and administrative adjustments. One, in terms of where they're placed in the code to make them a little bit easier for both staff and for any applicant to understand what they might be entitled to as in terms of a waiver or administrative adjustment, but also to create more flexibility within the code so that, as we go through all the different sections of the USDO, and there's quite a lot of different provisions in there, a project is going to be in compliance with the vast majority of those. So even if it seems like a lot that they might be requesting 5 waivers for a very large project, in the grand scheme of things it might not be, but it might also be necessary due to certain site restrictions that's unique to that property. We kind of see that a lot with things like curb cuts where there's a specific width that's required in the code, but for projects that are going to have a larger commercial traffic and certain truck radius requires a larger width, that there might just be a way to make that process easier. And then, lastly with that one is a waiver is something that's issued by the planning board. So when we have a minor development plan review, which is reviewed by the chief planning official and other city departments, really in order for it to issue the waiver, it has to be elevated to a major status to go before the planning board as the code's currently written. So revising some of those processes to make that whole process in general more straightforward and allowing a clear landscape and idea of whether or not certain elements or a lack of complying with certain code restrictions is going to be fully detrimental to the project continuing, or if it's something that they can work around. And with that, I'll turn it over if there's any questions on the presentation or the report itself.
Thank you. Any questions from committee members? Mr. Hoey.
Thank you, Evie, for a very good report, and Brad. I just got a question on, because I was looking at development plan reviews, it looked like we shot up to 55. Have we seen a drop-off of development in the city since we passed the affordable housing? We passed that, a certain percentage would have to be within an affordable range. Have we seen a drop-off in development since we passed that legislation?
It is just hard to say because those, the majority of those 55 are not things that would have, so it's like, a new 2-family dwelling or a townhouse. So typically the number of units, it wouldn't trigger any of the affordable housing requirements. We are still seeing some larger scale projects, but they're typically already coming to the table knowing that they want it to be affordable housing projects with the full intent of getting low-income housing tax credits from the state. So I don't think we have the data, at least from what we put together here, to say definitively one way or the other. And then also the projects under the 55 include other commercial type projects that wouldn't have those triggers either.
Okay, and I understand that. Do you foresee that if interest rates come down, because they're historically high right now, and do you think that we'll have a sudden jump in development? Because you have some ask in here. I'm just wondering how fast do we need to act on that before the amount of work increases? If the interest rates come down and people start developing more, should we be ready? Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm not entirely sure about that, but one of the things we did want to communicate through this presentation is we are a finite staff with a finite amount of time, so we want to make sure we're spending our time on the things that we all in this room want to be spending our time on. And we have noted some things that are going before a board for review that we're really not receiving any public comment for, and that triggers something. And then we have projects, as you know, that the room fills up. So I think to the extent that we can reallocate to look at some of the things we collectively want to be looking at is something we're trying to achieve. And we pointed out some easy wins in here, how we can reduce or eliminate the need for certain things and start there. But as far as interest rates, that's not That's not my area. I would expect, yeah, we'd see more projects. I think some of the projects we've been getting in the past year have been sort of these scatter site affordable housing developments, the South End and the home leasing in Clinton Avenue in particular. So I think if you were to take out the scatter site projects, it's more about 30 projects this year, so kind of on plan. So it's been pretty consistent. We're still busy. The projects, the types of projects we have seen have changed with respect to market rate housing. I mean, it's something that we're all continuing to monitor, I think, and you know, I think the interest rates will be informative, and I think, you know, we need to listen to what the people who are building are telling us too, and some of their reservations. So, you know, any way we can help with getting you the information you need, we'd be happy to help.
Thank you.
Councilwoman Seaman, and then Councilmember Adams.
Thank you, and thank you for your thorough explanation. But I do have a question on the report, and the annual report on page 16 that we have, the chart concerning the inclusionary housing. To sort of, maybe you could just help me understand this chart a little bit. So, where it says inclusionary zoning amended 423 after the amendment, those 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, those 9 projects listed from then were already. I'm just trying to understand what what stage they were at. Are they new applications since then? Since 423, not 423. April 3rd.
Since the inclusionary zoning provisions were adjusted, most of the projects you're seeing on there are affordable housing projects. There's no distinction in the code as to whether or not we need to get a plan if they're affordable or market rates. So each project that meets the unit threshold,
Right.
we do include on that list. In terms of market rate proposals, the projects that I'm aware of are 222 Spruce Street, which I think is about 40 some odd units. That is a market rate proposal that was submitted a while back and has been open for several months. I do believe that they're pursuing that, moving forward with that. There was a hotel on Washington Avenue that was converted to 99 units of housing from primarily for students, I presume, that did generate, in theory, for 13 affordable housing units per the code. I mean, they are a certain type of small unit. And there was a proposal from Redburn Development to convert the Union Station building into housing, which I think was planned for quite a while. They have since withdrawn that, and they're going to more commercial office use instead. So I think there has been a decline in the number of market rate developments. I think we should monitor that as the interest rates change. But again, I think the conversations that I've had with the parties that build those type of developments, they do have some reservations. So I totally understand the policy. I can only give you the data that I have, and that really we're dealing with a limited number of projects right now, so it's kind of hard to make a full estimation, but you know, it's something we should definitely keep an eye on, whether that's working or whether we need to broaden that to include other options for developers to pursue.
Absolutely, thank you. I just wanted to make sure I understood. And when the, as to the area variance applications such a steep decline, can you just quickly, the area variance applications decreasing so much, and I guess it started to tick up. I was just trying to understand the substantial decline in the number of appeals, what that trend had to do with, and why it's ticking back up, or if there's anything. This was on.
So, I mean, we fixed the code in a sense in that we eliminated a lot of the nonconformities that existed and brought the line into. So it used to be when someone was putting a deck on a house, it would be too close to the property line, they need a variance. So we fixed things such as that. You know, I would say, well, we have 47 now. There were years prior to 2017 where we had 160 some applications, and some of those were you know, it was application for a sign and it didn't meet 4 separate provisions of the code, but we treated it as one application. Now we actually treat that as 4 separate applications because they're distinct things. So really that 47 number is probably 15 in comparison to the 160 that was before. That said, 47 is still too many, and it's predominantly related to signs, and the board gets the applications, they look at them, and they go, this is pretty reasonable, and they approve them. So that's a case where we really need to make an adjustment. We have drafted a proposal that we will be submitting, and I think it'll help us with that number quite a bit. But we're interested to hear if there's signs or anything else that your constituents are bringing to your attention that we can add to the list of amendments that we would
Okay,
propose.
great. Thank you very much.
Councilmember Adams?
All right, thank you for the report. It's very detailed, it explains and provides a lot of data in regards to the efficiency of your review process and how the changes that we've made in the USDO since 2017 has allowed us to reduce some of the redundancy and some of the extra work that goes through your office, which I'm sure then has been piling up. But again, through the numbers in certain areas, we are seeing the reduction as to Councilwoman Zamer's question of why the decline is happening. And that's because the USDO, the changes, the amendments that we're making are aligning with provisions that we're having and trying to implement in the communities. And so I think having the USDO be as flexible as possible is one of the better things that we should try to strive for when making certain decisions. The ability to, again, I guess you're still working on it, but reducing the amount of time that you're spending on the review process, I think is primarily what at least I get from this. And showing that, again, the opportunity for development to happen is a lot more feasible and easier when we have things in the code that already outlines things but are not too detailed, where it's creating questions or concerns for when the review process is happening. There's a much longer conversation. And when it's flexible like this, it allows for, again, pre-existing developments to kind of move in and for businesses or not businesses, but developments to occur. I mean, overall, I don't really have too many issues. A lot of the information is pretty straightforward of how you presented it. Making sure that the different forms within the neighborhoods are staying similar, but again, allowing that flexibility, I think it's also key. But yeah, so I mean, overall, great presentation. I think we're heading in the right direction with the USDO, but again, as I mentioned, I think for us here, we just focus on, again, trying to reduce some of those reports that are still coming in, but also trying to update the USDO to, again, better align with what we're trying to accomplish here. But I think we're on a good path, so thank you.
Thank you, Councilman Adams. Are there any non-committee members that have any questions? Councilman Malinani.
Well, not questions, but just want to thank you guys for the annual update and the comprehensive plan, as always. Some of my constituents, I know in the city of Albany, we're starting to have an increase in aging population, and there are individuals, particularly, not just my generation, but my parents' generations, who find themselves sometimes, taking care of, their grandparents and also their kids, and I hope that, there's a way that maybe we can do some zoning where we can have like in-law suites, kind of think about those type of things as our population continues to age in the city of Albany. As it relates to the subsidy aspect of it, and this is a question that some of my constituents wanted to ask about giving subsidies, that will have to go through the IDA, correct, for any type of subsidies for in-law suites, et cetera. But as relates to the zoning, that will have to come in front of the planning board, et cetera.
I mean, I think the tool that we have for incentives is principally the IDA. I mean, there are other tools that municipalities can use, but each city has a different tax structure and so on, so. Yeah, but I mean, I think the first thing is making sure that they're allowed, the product that we want is allowed, and then we can figure out how to, it gets financed, but, you know, we don't want to be a roadblock for things like that, so certainly open to those ideas.
You gotcha. And I remember a couple of years ago, I had a tour just about the USDO, and I remember you guys showing like projects that are like shovel-ready, or what the 2030 plan is or the vision is for the city of Albany. How do people get, how do you guys market that? Would the, you know, the developer have to come in front of you guys to kind of get those information to see what the city of Albany vision is? Like, how do we make those renderings readily available to anyone that's looking to like invest, maybe the Chamber of Commerce, or just sharing that with other developers? Because I remember I watched a presentation that you guys did, I think it was part of the USDO, where it showed a vision of development by the waterfront. And I thought, wow, that's amazing. You know, if we could just kind of market that a little bit more. So as it relates to some of the ideas that the residents of the city of Albany has, and also some of us that we have worked together, has in store. So just kind of marketing a little bit more. So that's something that I like to see outside of USDO.
Yeah, I mean, you're talking about visualizing it more, I think, yeah. I mean, we don't always have that skill set, but, you know, we have produced renderings from time to time for certain projects. It's something that, you know, it is helpful to take a site and try to visualize what it could be. So that's something we could certainly talk about. I mean, it'd probably require a third party to assist us with doing those sort of renderings. They're rather complex things that don't come with our degree, at least. So, you know, but it would certainly help. And in terms of the vision, I mean, the code and the comprehensive plan kind of are the vision, but I understand they're big documents, so how can distill that down? I think that's a longer conversation, but happy to engage on that further. No.
Thank you, Councilmember Nani. For the record, Committee Member Hyde has joined us. Hyde Clark has joined us. Any other questions or comments by committee or non-committee members?
I just have one last question.
No, that's okay.
It's regarding like the 76 project, right? 76 Second Ave project. When they say expired, right? Does a new developer have to start from scratch to apply, or was the process to?
So the zoning is still in place, the base zoning, but
Correct.
it would need to go through a new development plan review. And we haven't received anything. Everything I understand, though, is it's a different project than it was. It's several stories less, and it's a different design. So, plus, you know, as we continue to refine and update the code, things in the code do change. So there may be something in there, not for that project specifically, but for a project that comes forward 4 years later, where we've made a collective decision that we want something to look differently, and
Yeah.
that's why things expire over a certain period of time. But, yep.
Okay, any additional comments, questions, concerns? Okay, well, thank you again for your time, gentlemen, and for your effort on this. I know you two, you put a lot of time on this, and want you to know that we all appreciate it. So thank you.
Thanks for your time as well.
Okay, now we're going to move on to ordinance 1753-24. For this ordinance, we're going to start with public comments. Since we have public comments, people have signed up for public comments. Everyone will have 3 minutes for public comments to express your thoughts on this bill. During public comments, committee members cannot ask any questions, and they cannot answer any questions. Public comment is just for informative information, getting information from the public, getting comments from the public. So, you know, just want to make sure people are aware of that. During public comment period, it's not an interaction type of structure. It's just comments being shared by the public to the council. I do know that there's some people who have entered the chamber since we took the list. So is it possible? Did you get everybody? Yes, if to please sign up anyone else that may have come in late so that we don't miss anybody and allow everyone who's here to speak. But while we are signing up those additional people, Brian, can you get us started with our first speaker? And can you give me the signal when we have our 3 minutes up?
Yeah.
Thank
That'll
you.
be Michael Cohn, I believe.
Button, all right. Sorry here. My name is Michael Cohn, lifelong Albany resident. I'm currently a DJ. I was here before this law passed. We were told it was supposed to streamline the way music is approved in the city of Albany. It failed to do that. The real reason I think it was passed was to control crime. Hasn't done that. But since I only have 3 minutes, I want to tell you how it affected me. I was at LAX on Lark Street. I had shows on Thursday and Saturday. Thursday night became a black crowd, and great crowd. We never had any problems. Neighbors would call and complain about the noise. I knew that the noise was the same as it had always been. I was a DJ. I controlled the noise, okay? One day, Kathy Sheehan came in. She did a karaoke fundraiser, and the owners asked her why they couldn't get approval to offer music on a Friday night. And Mayor Sheehan told them that they needed to reach out to their neighbors. And they interpreted that as they needed to do something about their Thursday night crowd. And so one Thursday night after my gig at 2 a.m., the owner asked me to take all the black music out of my songbooks. And I said, sorry, I can't do that. I'm not going to tell somebody they can't sing Beyonce or Stevie Wonder. And so I quit. So it affected me personally. It affected my income. And it affected LAX. They lost business. But the insidious thing about this law is that it gives the city too much power over our nightlife. If a business can't satisfy the whims of the police department, the fire department, neighborhood Karens, they can call and complain, and license can be revoked. Businesses can't rely on the ability to transfer their business. If you want to sell a business, how do you place a value on your business? This law has basically killed nightlife in Albany. This is what I only have 3 minutes, but before this law was passed, this is what I posted on Facebook. The city of Albany is proposing to fight crime like that which occurred at the former Plastic on the backs of small businesses with this cabaret license law. It's insane and will have a chilling effect on the nightlife that we all peacefully enjoy. And it was a call to get people to come to City Hall. Let our politicians know that this is not a solution and is not good for the city and its culture, and it hasn't been. Nightlife has disappeared in the city of Albany. It's not good for our culture. People are going elsewhere. We need a nightlife. It makes the city safer because there are people out on the streets. It creates a whole different cultural vibe, the kind of cultural vibe that we want to attract. Thank you.
Thank you. And I just want to make this statement. If there's additional comments that anybody wants to put in writing, you could also give that to us, and we'll get that to the members. But thank you very much. Thank you for your comments.
Thank you.
Craig Earl.
Yeah, I have a number of talking points, so I brought with me. I'd like to put those in the record. Thank you.
Hello. Good thing I wrote something down. Hi, my name is Craig Earl. I've been a DJ in the area for 16 years, and I'm currently the new GM of the Fusebox. For as long as I can remember, a cabaret license or a lack thereof a cabaret license has been a death sentence for a number of restaurants, lounges, banquet halls, and concert venues in the capital region. Usually after the loss of a cabaret license or the inability to attain one, and you no longer have the ability to have live music or DJs in your establishment, not so soon after, there's a loss of the business as a whole. A small business owner loses a dream, a landlord has an empty building, sometimes for years, almost decades, and the community has lost a place to call home. Sometimes that means people have to resort to going to an underground speakeasy or driving very long distances and increasing their risk of driving intoxicated. A lot of people would much rather stay close, but frankly, there aren't enough options. There's been a lot of residential development in Albany to attract more people to the area, but there's a severe lack of development for entertainment. How will those people be entertained? Do we send them to one of our local restaurants and then send them home after? For as long as there have been people, there's been a need for those people to congregate, to gather, to party. Without the need for cabaret licenses, we could fill those needs with multi-use buildings and perhaps have better luck finding something to do in Albany. Thank you.
Thank you.
Chris Pratt.
Good evening. I didn't write anything down. I'll be brief. My name is Chris Pratt. I have been owner of properties in the city of Albany. I was a resident until my recent marriage, and I've owned 7 different bars, nightclubs in the city, and the biggest one being the former Jillian's, a Pearl Street pub. And I was involved in the inception of when the cabaret license came in, and I am in strong support of repealing this license. And I'm sure everyone that will speak could give the same reasons, but the one that I would like all of you to consider is, and I'll just be blunt about it, our city is dying. It's dying. And I don't think it's one person. I think it's collectively a lot of things that have happened in this city with the way the laws have been passed. And I understand the concerns, I do, because I lived them. When I was at Pearl Street Pub, we were the largest nightclub in the area. We had people coming from out of state to see us every Saturday. And for 12 years of my life, I was there every weekend, and some of you would see me there till 4 in the morning. And I was a responsible bar owner. And the one thing I will say is, in your consideration of repealing this law, we need to hold restaurant, bar, entertainment owners accountable. That's why this happened. This happened because we had people that were not minding their store. They were not minding their business. And I really believe that we need some sort of guidelines, as any normal society does. But what we really need is to hold the people that do not want to run an establishment right, hold them accountable. And I am living proof that it can be done. Most nightclubs have a shelf life of maybe 5 years max. We did 12 years. And the reason we did 12 years was because I will take credit that I was there every weekend as a responsible owner. I made sure that we had a strict dress code. I made sure that the people that were causing problems, that we flagged them and didn't let them back in. It can be done without this cabaret. So, and this meeting is amazing that it's happening at this time. Friday night, I was sitting in the Lark Tavern, which I own now, one bar, thank God, living a great married life. But I was sitting at the bar, and someone from the city, from Codes, came and said we had to close our door at 9:30. 9:30, there was 8 people in the bar. and there was music playing. It wasn't loud. It was just normal bar music. And I don't know the young man's name, but he's like, you need to close your doors. And I said, why? He said, well, you're in violation of your cabaret license for recorded music. I'm sorry, it's ridiculous. It's a beautiful summer night. The door's open. We're trying to survive, everyone. My wife and I went to dinner out for a glass of wine in Troy Saturday night, and it was vibrant. There was live music. There's people walking around. We're not seeing that. We're not. And again, it's not any one person's fault, but this has got to stop. Albany needs to be open for business again. Thank you.
Thank you.
Semel Kakumba.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Semel Kakumba, the owner of Central Qualities. It's a local security company in the area that does security for the businesses around, particularly the nightclubs. Been doing it since 2017, I say, about 8 years going on. The issue that I see, and I feel for the owners, because we'll get a contract, we'll come out, we'll do what we're supposed to do. These owners are doing the best they can to make sure that the city, the night is safe. Customers come in, they're searched, ID'd, they follow every rule and regulation that's provided there that they have to. And I see them get shut down, or an incident occurs, and the owners are not exciting any of these incidents to happen. They don't want any of these things to happen. In any neighborhood, whether it's Log Street, whether it's Uptown, any area in Albany where we have live music, they want a good night. The residents want a good night. Even the gentleman that we had prior that was discussing developments, if you want to bring developments to Albany, the residents that want to move here need places to go. There's nowhere for them to go. And doing security, for me, I have to always think about, okay, how can I make sure my men have work, day in and day out? If this business is getting ready to get shut down, or they can't have this party this night, or they got flagged, they can't do this because it's just so tough to keep it going. It's just so difficult, and I've seen it just dwindle. We've all seen it dwindle over the last 8 years. And it just needs to be looked at as just how are we gonna bring people here and want people to come and live in this city when there's nothing for them to do between a demographic of 25 to 35, what can you do after 9 o'clock? You come make your money, you wanna go out and enjoy it, where? It's a list full of places. Like, something has to happen, especially when these owners are paying security companies to come and make sure that things are safe, because I'm one of them. And everybody here knows, if you see me, you know that's what I'm coming to do, whether it's Law Call, numerous places. That's all I got to say.
Thank you. Next speaker.
Tragedy, and for the record, I believe that's William Yeager.
Hello, my name is William Tragedy Yeager, born and raised in Albany. I've owned several businesses here and still do. I am recently, 3 years now, I own the Fuse Box at this time, and I worked there as a young man from 1987 to about 1997 when it closed down as the QE2 and then reopened again in 2021 as the Fuse Box. I opened the Fuse Box originally in the back of the Power Company, which is a gay bar across the street, as a secondary bar, kind of like more of a bossa nova type thing. And there was no cabaret licenses back then. Back then, you could own a business in Albany, and people did. We had a flourishing nightlife. And the thing is about city life is that without a nightlife, you really don't have a city life. So if we're trying to be just a suburb or just the capital of New York where people come here to do state business, I guess that could happen. But if this is a viable city, the capital of New York State, I don't think the cabaret license is helping in any way. I know that the cabaret license in New York City, I think it was there since like 1936. It was there strictly to control the nightlife, and it even got rescinded in 2017. I think it's time for a change. I don't want to leave Albany. Everything I've made here, everything I've built here is here. Every dime I've ever made here is still here. But it makes it very difficult to be in business in Albany. And I have a cabaret license right now. So, you know, it's hard for me every year. It's like double stamping a triple stamp. You know, a lot of the cabaret license is it's to pay to get the license every year. You have to have certain checks and balances. They have to have the fire department walk through again, even though we had sprinkler inspections, we had third-party inspections. It's just over and over, but really it's about control, right? It's control, and like I don't want to use words like, you know, gatekeeping, but it kind of is sometimes. Like you're keeping people from being able to open their business, and then if you let them open the business, you're keeping your foot on their neck, so if they come out of pocket in any kind of way, they can shut them down, whether it's code, Albany Police Department, the mayor of Albany, whatever it is. It can be closed down. It makes it hard to do business in Albany. I love my city. I'm not going anywhere. And you've seen me here before, and you'll probably see me here again. But, yep, I'm against it. Let's repeal this. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker.
Tiara Brandon.
Good evening, everybody. I'm a little nervous. I didn't come here to speak, but it's heavy on my heart to speak, so I'm just gonna. I currently own, or at least 2 bars in Albany. One which was the former Cagney's. The name of it is now Blowing Smoke. I run a pretty successful business. We have a tight security. We have, to go back to what he was saying about holding the owners accountable. We have something in place that we use, it's an ID scanner where we scan IDs. And I just feel like that helps us in, you know, people gonna think twice about doing something silly if they know you have their ID, you know, on file. So maybe, you know, if you guys do move to, you know, maybe do away with the cabaret, maybe that's something you could put in place, you know, if that's one of your concerns. As I said, we have Blowing Smoke. We've been open for 4 years. We do very well. I most recently leased the old Paulie's, and I haven't really been able to open much because of the cabaret situation. It's been 3 months now, so about 2 weeks ago, like 2 Fridays ago, I had a party. I had a flyer out for the party. I got a call from Cole at like 8 in the morning. I don't know if it was Cole or the police. It was one of them. But they called. They were like, oh, we know you're having a party tonight. We know you're having a party tonight, and that can't happen because you don't have your public assembly. So I said, I do have my public assembly. I literally follow every single step, every rule that you guys have in place to, you know, run a business properly. And for the most part, we don't really get bothered. The Blowing Smoke, we're in pretty good standing with, you know, code, the health department, fire department, inspections. But this new one, so they came, so I opened anyway, because I have to make money. I've had this place for 3 months, can't open because, you know, they make you go through all these different steps. It's thing after thing. The public assembly is something new that they made us do, but we did it. So I told him, I said, we have it and I'm opening. I've already promoted it. I have, you know, my staff in place. I have security in place. I have to make some money to pay these bills. He said, I don't think you have it. It was a Saturday, actually. It was a Friday, but so I said, well, you should probably check your records because I've done everything I'm supposed to do. We open up, they come, full force, 12 midnight. It's probably 4 code, 4 police. And you know, as a business owner, that's pretty embarrassing to be in running your business with people, they're enjoying themselves, you know, people are having a good time, and then you look up and you just see all these people in uniform just there, just kind of to harass you a little bit, and it's embarrassing, especially when you do what you're supposed to do by the book, how it's supposed to be done. So he comes in, I have my paper posted, capacity is 99, I got my public, I had everything, because something told me they were gonna come. So there's a code guy, his name is Josh, he comes in, or Big Macho, it's like 4 of them, and then there's police behind them. And then it's just like, you know, we went on with the night, but it put a bad taste in people's mouth. Like, people don't know what the police are there talking to me about. They just see all of these people in uniform, like, surrounding me, like, you have to shut this thing down. And I'm like, what do you, so I show him the paperwork for the public assembly, and then he goes, oh, well, you have to have your public assembly if they gave you your capacity. And he was like, well, then your capacity is 49. It looks like you have well over 49 people in here. I said, no, my capacity is 99. Here's the paper. So then he goes, oh, so he whispered to the code guy, and then he whispers to the police, and he's like, oh, well, still you don't have your cabaret. And I was like, well, we don't have a DJ. I have somebody back there. You know, we have a playlist so that the music doesn't cut off. But he was like, well, maybe you do have your public assembly, but I'm pretty sure you don't have your cabaret. So again, we're shutting this down. The business that I just opened, the Old Paulie's, it's 35 plus. Like, I'm talking about people, you guys don't know my age, but I'm talking about people like my mom's age, people that want to come out and have a good time, listen to some good music, and just enjoy and have a drink. And they were just flabbergasted, like, so they're really making you turn on the lights and leave? And it's like, they don't care. They don't care if we fail. It's almost like they're against it all. Like, they want to see you, they don't want to see you succeed, because it's like nothing was going on. It probably was 50 people there, and they're just sitting down, just a few of them are twirling around, and it was lit up. It was security. It was nothing going on, and they literally was like, well, you don't have your cabaret, so this has to end now. It has to end right now. And they fined me, and they gave me they didn't give it to me, they gave it to the building owner. So now you gotta understand, like, once the building owner starts getting fines because of something that he feels like you did, he don't know the situation, he wasn't there. It's just, I have a fine now because you opened on this night. And I'm just like, well, how am I supposed to pay your rent if I cannot open this place up? What do you want me to do? So it's just like a chain reaction. Like, code comes harass you, then they send stuff to the owner. Now the owner is like iffy of you because he don't know what's going on. And I'm like, I have everything that I'm supposed to have. Like, they came in for the public assembly. While they were there, they figured out I have my public assembly, so then they went to the cabaret. And ultimately, that's how they were able to shut us down, due to the cabaret. And now the owner of the building is looking at me like, oh, you're not doing what you're supposed to be doing, or because of a cabaret. But there's no way for me to keep this business open and pay this man his rent or pay National Grid or anybody else if my cabaret is sitting somewhere on somebody's desk and it's just under a pile of papers and nobody cares about it. There's no way for me to open this place and pay the bills to keep the place up and running and successful. So that's what I wanted to say. I didn't come to talk, but I needed to tell you guys that. Thank you.
Thank you for your time. Thank you. Next speaker.
I believe we have a James Scott.
Hello, good evening. So I have a couple points here, but I won't go over a lot of the points that were already stated. I think everybody else pretty much. I said I have a couple of points here, but I won't go over all of them because I feel like everybody else pretty much did a sufficient job in doing so. I kind of just want to highlight our personal experience with the situation. I'm one of the owners of the Red Room, and I can relate to like codes trying to harass business owners, because we had codes actually give us fines on days that we weren't even open, like as a business. So I had to go to court, I had to appear, I had to hire a lawyer, I had to do a lot on the business's behalf to address things where we weren't even open on those days. So ultimately, the judge just found us obviously not guilty because of the fact that we weren't even open to begin with. So to me, as a business owner, it kind of establishes a certain type of relationship with us and codes, because it's like we kind of already feel violated, because how do you accrue fines on days you weren't even open? Your doors weren't even open to begin with. So that in itself, I believe, was an issue. In addition to that, as far as the cabaret license goes, we've already applied for this cabaret license 2 times and we're denied. We don't have any police history as far as having any fights happenings, any shootings happening, anything crime related we don't have happening at our establishment. As a lot of the other business owners have stated, we have the appropriate security. We submitted their security licenses. We have metal detectors at our establishment, as well as the same ID scanner being mentioned, where if you scan somebody's ID, it's saved in your system for the night. So God forbid, if something does happen, we can pull up this person's ID on the scanner, see where they live, see all of their information, in addition to having the appropriate surveillance at the bar where it's 24-hour recording. So it's been extremely difficult with this process, being over $400 in on this cabaret license, not obtaining it, also doing what we can night, day in, day out, to make sure that nothing happens at the establishment. Being an owner is not easy, as everybody can attest to. So it's like we trying to make sure we have our ducks in a row, but it just seems as if the city isn't working like with us and kind of against us. And therefore, not only is the nightlife dying, it's just like the whole vibe in Albany as itself is dying. And it kind of saddened me to see people go on national TV and say things like, oh, good luck finding something to do in Albany, when it's like, you know, we have more than enough to offer here. Like, so, especially from I'm a UAlbany graduate, I kind of seen the phases of Albany, and then me just coming into this, being a business owner, and when it's kind of my time, it's just like, wow, this is what's going on now in Albany. So I kind of came into this where the nightlife was very ripe, and then now it just kind of seems as if like there is none, period. And I would understand if having these precautions in place would actually reflect on crime. It's not helping. There's nothing changing. Like this cabaret license stuff it didn't lower the crime. If anything, I see more things happening in our communities, like, because there's nothing to do. So when you give people nothing to do, they're gonna do wrong. So I just want to put that out there, like from my perspective and my angle. Thank you guys, appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you. Next speaker.
Yeah. We do ask that you provide your name and address, just because we don't have it written down.
Hello, good evening. My name is Ramari McDowell. Good evening to everyone. I don't have a lot to say because I feel like a lot of people that came up here already and mentioned a lot of things that were on their minds, but this has been an ongoing battle with restaurants, bars, and taverns not being able to run their business to their full potential that can be reached because of this cabaret license. I feel like this is just impeding a lot of businesses from reaching their ultimate experience for a bar or even a tavern, for patrons to come in. If you're not able to have live music to keep the patrons entertained, that's definitely something that's gonna have a detriment to your business over time. So I think that's definitely important to just highlight that. As James has mentioned, we personally applied for this cabaret license twice and haven't been given a clear explanation as to why we're being denied. So it's just, as he mentioned, it doesn't make us feel like the Albany is on our side. We go to all the meetings, we go to everything that we can do to get answers, to make sure that we're doing everything to follow the guidelines, and it doesn't feel like you guys are like really trying to work with us. It looks like the cabaret license is put in place to kind of hinder businesses from progressing. So that's just a few points I wanted to mention. A lot of business owners take at least 2 to 3 years. I know for us, it took almost 3 years for us to get this license. So to finally get to this stage and not being able to run the business to the full degree that you would like for it to be at is kind of saddening. So that's probably the best way to put it. Aside from that, we do, as James also mentioned, we do use a lot of safety measures. So I would also agree with if a business or cannot control their crowd when it comes to coming to the bar, I feel like that should be within itself. So if you go to a business and you feel like they can't control their crowd or a lot of things is happening, then that within itself should be something like, all right, we shouldn't grant this place a cabaret license. But if some place is always doing great, a lot of places that have a lot of people coming through night after week, and there's no issues, there shouldn't be any reason why they should be denied a cabaret license. So I definitely feel like this is not something that's helping Albany's nightlife. I think it's definitely hindering us, and I think that we do need to do something drastic about it. So that's all I want to say. Keep it brief. Thank you.
Thank you.
Were there any other members of the public who wish to speak? Yes. As a reminder, please provide your name and address for the record.
Good evening, Nubian Lawrence, 200 Green Street, Albany, New York. I'm a DJ. I've been a resident of Albany since the 2000s. I've been actually blessed to see both sides of the issue. I believe the Cabaret had a good idea, but it's just not the answer for it. And from my experience, black venues get targeted. And a lot of times it's never the owner's fault, it's not the DJs. It's really uncontrollable to deal with the headaches. And nightlife here has died because venues get penalized. They can't open, DJs can't DJ, we lose places. I also DJ for Empire State Plaza. I'm on the corporate side. I think there needs to be more of a unity on the security between the owners, security companies, and the police department, not code and the Cabaret. The Cabaret does not solve any of the real issues. That's the problem. And that's all I really wanted to say.
Thank you. Any additional comments?
Any other members? I believe that's all we have for public comment.
Okay, thank you. And thank you everybody for coming out and speaking today. We do appreciate that. At this point, I'd like to have the sponsors, give us a little bit of insight. It's Councilmember Flynn, Councilmember Adams. A little bit of insight.
I'm glad they spoke first because I actually learned a lot from some of the people that I was unaware of. So it makes our case for repealing the Cabaret law, I think, a little bit stronger because I was only expecting a few people here, not 10 people. So I appreciate all the people that came. But, the nightlife, I believe, has gone down since the Cabaret law did come into effect. I got a list of bars back in the 90s and 2000s I'm sure you've all been to. Bogey's, the Big House, these are Jillian's, McGeary's, Partridge Pub, the Plaza Grill, Savannah's, these are all in the lower wards, 2nd and 3rd ward, when the Albany nightlife was booming and vibrant. So, it's funny, as I came into today and I talked to somebody about the Cabaret law, they said, what is Albany like the movie Footloose? There's no dancing in Albany anymore. Right now, can anybody name a bar you have to go to? You can go out and dance. I think there's one, maybe. But point is, we got to get ready to be back. I think the process for small businesses is too much. It's literally 2 or 3 pages to get a license. There's a lot of restrictions. I know, there's debate that we can change it, but, we got to, New York City repealed it, 2017, like somebody said. They had it for 80 years, and they finally repealed it. So I'll let Sergio speak on behalf of the. I believe it's a very discriminatory and redlining legislation, but I'll let Sergio speak on behalf of that.
So me and Councilmember Flynn had this ordinance come into because, one, as we were talking, for years now, I've gone to all of your establishments and have spoken to business owners over the years, as well as being able to see the decline in nightlife, but also the culture that we had in Albany. From the business side of things, this is my more pressing issue because we are enabling and stopping growth here in our city. When we're at a time where we need more growth, we need more investment in our city, we are fighting business owners and making it more difficult for them to do their job, for them to provide for their families, for them to be a part of the city of Albany's fabric. I think the Cabaret license does an injustice to our nightlife, but also our businesses. It's preventing people from being able to carry out their business plan as they created it. It's making people lose money for several months because they're waiting for documentations to be approved and people to sign off on things. All these things are holding our nightlife and our business owners back from their true potential. As mentioned, the bias and the discriminatory practices that come from this type of legislation has been blatant. It has been clear And it has been shown as for a track record for many years. Everyone in this room, sitting on that side, can attest to it. We are trying to get to a point where Black-owned business owners, minority-owned business owners are able to function and do business here in the city of Albany without having to fear and be persecuted for bringing entertainment to a group of people who are paying customers. The fact that we have establishments and a administration that has pushed or allowed this type of behavior to happen where, again, our Black business owners feel targeted. I have seen it very clear with my own eyes. I've heard conversations, I've seen blatant text message and emails in regards to things where, again, this is not the example that we should be setting here in our city. This is not the type of business culture that we should create in our city. The fact that business owners are telling us that they feel attacked, that they're being attacked, they have proof of these things because the departments that we're hearing these concerns from also have had other issues in regards to this. So these are not made up or disillusioned beliefs. These are things that are actually happening to people here in our city. The business owners are trying to curate and do whatever it is needed to abide by the rules, regulations set before the council here in the city, the SLA, all these different places they're trying to satisfy. They're doing exceptional work in terms of bringing the nightlife back. We have to meet them halfway. We have to be able to remove the cancers from the environment that's holding our growth back in terms of our businesses. It's unfair to have to go through a whole document of businesses for the last 4 or 5 years, and again, most of the businesses are not business owners of color. There's nothing that's preventing people of color here in the city from opening businesses besides the fact that they're not feeling supported. They're not being invested to. They're not being worked with. They're not being communicated to. These are things that can be changed. We need to repeal this because this is what's holding growth back. There is no justification that's relevant today for us to keep this on the books. If a legislation is not working, we need to repeal it and get rid of it. It's no point of having it on the books for us to just dance around or try to find, corners to cut in order to make this work. Release it. Let's see how business thrives. Let's give people an opportunity to grow their businesses, to add value to our city. And if for whatever reason there becomes a problem, then just like we're having this conversation here, we will bring it up and address it again. But we need to repeal this now. So it's so much to say, but crime has also not been decreasing because of the lack of music. Music does not create crime. Having venues that play music or live music, a band, it adds value to this business. It's not creating the violence that we are seeing. And if we're being realistic, the fact that there's businesses who are taking the extraordinary step to add extra protection to their businesses should go a long way. If they are taking the safety of their customers as seriously as they're showing, again, we need to be able to extend grace and opportunity for them to do business. We need to allow for our DJs to be able to have jobs. We need them to be able to be booked. We need people to be able to provide the security at these places. This law affects much more than just one singular venue space. it is addressing and affecting the pockets of many people, as you just heard this evening, from the owner to the staff to the DJ to the security. Everyone is being affected by this, and it's not helping anyone. So please support our repeal, support the business owners here in the city of Albany, support our city in growing and moving in the right direction. Thank you.
Fred, I just want to, for the record, Jason Pierce, the president of the Albany Restaurant Association, is in favor of this, and he says three things. It's economic impact, cultural enrichment, and regulatory burden. So I just want to put that for the record, that Jason Pierce, owner of Savoy and Copper Crow, and the Restaurant Association is in favor of repealing this.
Okay, thank you. Any questions from committee members? Okay, Councilwoman Seaman and then Councilman Hoey.
Thank you. First of all, I want to thank all the business owners and professional DJs who came to speak to us so eloquently and identifying an issue that you're all experiencing. I have a lot of questions, and I don't know who can give me answers here. You know, we did get a letter from former council member Richard Conti, who was involved with the original cabaret license law. So what we got today, I'm trying to figure out what was the initial problem that this addressed back in 2012. Like, what was the need, if anybody has any idea of the background of how this law came to be initially?
I think...
I don't know if...
I'm not asking you, I'm sorry, you're not allowed to. I'm asking people here. I'm asking, if we don't
I have no idea the original intent of it.
Let's get back in, so...
I apologize, I didn't mean to open that to
no,
the public.
that's okay. That's
Some of
okay.
these are questions that need to be answered after.
I think it'd be
this
great
meeting.
to be able to get former council member Conti to come and speak to us at a future meeting. I think that would share some information. Brian, do you have the email from? No? Okay.
No, staff did not
I'm sorry,
receive
that
it.
wasn't to all of us. Maybe it was just to the committee.
I think you just went to the committee. So maybe if you can, I'll get that to you and you can share
I know
it
he
with
wanted that, he
members.
wanted, it said in his email that he wanted to be here, so he obviously wanted it to be public.
Okay.
My other, that's kind of a big question, I think, that I need to have answered at some point. I have small business owners in my family businesses here in the city of Albany. I know intimately how difficult it is to start a business, and it's not just our city regulations, it's on many levels of government, what businesses have to do to get a liquor license in this state. I mean, it's unbelievable. There's so many layers and so much difficulty in running a small business, and I don't know if this is going to solve that, but I think we really need to take a look at whether we can at least lessen the burden. If this is what business owners are saying is a burden, I would, want to hear that, want to listen to them. So I guess I have a question about was there any fallout to New York City's repealing of their cabaret law? So basically, I guess what I'm asking is that we take a little bit more time so we can have the strongest argument possible if that's what needs to happen here. And yes, I'm asking for a little more time to consider this.
Okay, I'm gonna ask Brad Glass. He's our director of planning. He raised his hand when you asked that question. If you'd like to, maybe share some more information. I know you were here during those times, and share your perspective.
Sure. So I started with the city in 2007, and I want to be clear, I didn't draft the cabaret law. It's not my favorite piece of legislation. That said, I think it came in 2011 or 2012. 2012. I mean, and I don't want to discount Mr. Yeager's opinion, because I know him well, and he said he's been around longer than I have. So, but I think on paper, the process prior to the cabaret law was actually quite difficult in and of itself, because it required a zoning approval that you had to go to the Board of Zoning Appeals, and I think it was subject to the same level of subjectivity as some are alleging with respect to the current law and the way it's written. And it really didn't make sense the way it was on paper. I think there are fewer overall approved live music venues and cabarets. So I think the intent with the law, though, was, and I think Chris Pratt said it earlier, with respect to holding business owners accountable, I would question if this were repealed, how could that still take place? Because it's a license, so it can be taken away in the case that something occurs. I think it would also give, in some cases, if there is a large show occurring, the public service entities the ability to plan and respond for that. That's not to say that the law is perfect or it's the absolute right mechanism, but I think there are some things the council should consider before explicitly repealing. And again, I'm getting into opinions now, but that was my, you need a use variance in a lot of cases from the Board of Zoning Appeals, and we talked about earlier how difficult those approvals are to get. And when they were granted, I think they were granted in a way that was playing pretty fast and loose with the regulatory rules that are applied to those.
Okay.
So
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, and I don't expect you to know this, but I guess what I'm trying to get at here is, so was there a situation where there were so many like out of control nightclubs and music, and that the city had no method in which to enforce
One that
a
I
noise
recall-
ordinance, or is there? I think that's what I'm trying to see. We already have something on the books that could take care of irresponsible business owners, similar to what Mr. Pratt mentioned. Is this cabaret permit necessary?
I don't know that we do in that case. I mean, but the one that jumps to mind would be the Armory. I think that they actually had gotten a zoning approval that ran with the land, and that there was problematic activities that occurred related to large concerts that they were holding there. It was very difficult legally for the city to rescind their approval to do that, being they had been granted approval from the Board of Zoning Appeals, which runs with the land. So this made it a licensing system that essentially if someone misbehaved, for lack of a better word, that could be taken away, that approval. So that's my understanding of going from a land use approval that runs with the land to a licensing system. And I think, again, there were a lot of parties at the table looking for a compromise at that time from something that I think was being prohibitive entertainment at that time. That said, again, there are people in this room that go back further than I do, and I don't know how it was regulated pre-zoning, if that was something that came about at a certain time, but I remember from 2007 to 2012, there was problems with the approvals that were being granted not being easy to get and running with the land so that they couldn't be rescinded in a particular way if there was a problematic occurrence. And I remember there being that with the case of the Armory. So.
Okay, thank you.
I hope it was helpful.
Yeah, no, I know. I think we'll have to. I appreciate that. I'm gonna need some fuller background.
Thank you. Councilmember Hoey? He was next, and then I can let you.
No, I was just going to follow up on his, but.
Sure, thank you, Chair Ballerin. Yeah, I got kind of blindsided by this. I'm just reading about it today. I didn't realize we had a meeting tonight. I actually took off my regular day job to get stuff done that I'm just behind on. So I did go through this part 3 of the law, and there's some interesting stuff in there. But I do want to bring up, because I am public safety chair, that in 2003, February, in Warwick, Rhode Island, there was a nightclub fire and over 100 people died and 230 were injured. It was one of the worst nightclub fires in U.S. history. So I know somebody brought up about the fire department coming in and inspecting. I mean, I want to see that because not only does it protect the patrons, it does protect the owners. That, it was inspected, that this should be safe if something horrible were to happen. And there's been nightclub fires down in New York City, illegal, people running illegal get-togethers. And not too long ago, there was a pretty bad one in the Bronx. But I do want to put our clerk on the spot because I'm going through the licensing procedure, and it seems like you're central to the whole process. And, I heard a bunch of complaints about people saying they never heard back. Can you, and I'm not accusing or anything, but I would like to know, and I think the committee would like to know, can you go over the process and, where there might be holdups and stuff like that? Thank you, Shanika.
Yes, so I'll answer the latter. The holdup comes from my office waiting from the various departments to provide us with their feedback, whether or not the cabaret license will be issued or denied, or issued with a condition that they follow up with maybe building and regulatory compliance to address the issues on that side. So when we have, applicants come in for, questioning, like, what's an update, or where do their applications stand? Unfortunately, I really don't have a lot of information to provide them because I'm waiting myself. So if I don't have the information, then I can't give them a proper update, which is in my opinion, is doing a disservice to, our owners because they're looking to, open up and to, get ready for business. But unfortunately, I'm running into a lot of us waiting for responses from various departments on whether or not we could move forward with their application.
Is there a timeline, how much time a department has to respond? Do we have that written into the law?
So we don't have anything written per se about whether or not there's a specific timeline. Once we hold the public hearing.
Well, I meant the department, like you send out a request to a department head.
Yeah.
Now you're waiting to get it, and maybe it's just one left before this could be approved, this license.
Unfortunately, sometimes it's weeks.
Okay. Now, and again,
sometimes it's months.
If we had a process in place where you have like 10 days to respond to this request or it automatically goes in, would that be something maybe we might help the situation if we were to tweak the law?
It's something that I've played around with, within my office, whether or not that's something that we could do to amend this, because I don't want to hold up the application process. I don't want to hold up them being issued their cabaret license. But if it's something where if we did away with, let's say, the public hearing process and just did a public comment period for maybe 15 days, then that's something that I would like to consider if that was an option. But I don't want to do anything further than what we have right now if it's going to hinder us making a decision on whether or not the application can be approved.
Yeah, I wasn't even thinking of the public hearing. I'm thinking more if you send down the request to a department, there's 5 departments listed here, and you don't hear back, I'd like to see that process pick up.
Absolutely, I would like to see that too. If we can put something like a 10-day, turnaround period, that would help me out a lot. But if we still don't get a response from that department, I think for me as a city clerk, I would like to still be able to issue that, given that we've given enough time for a department to respond.
Yeah. And then the other thing I wanted to ask you about was the fees, because some of the fees to me, and I know you don't set them, but you probably, it just seems like the more people involved, the higher the fee goes. So the larger the entertainment place, it just goes up. Is that because it's more work? Do you have any idea why we have this sliding scale
Yeah,
for fees?
It's definitely not more work on us. The process is the process, and I think it'll stay that way until, council makes a decision. In regards to the fees, I believe this, it had to be set based on the maximum capacity for an establishment. If we could, there's a lot of owners do come in and they do complain about the fees are so high. Unfortunately, I just have to go back to what the ordinance says.
Okay. Yeah, I really appreciate that. And again, my feeling, and from my perspective, this shouldn't be punishing people. It should be just that you went through, for safety reasons, we've gone through and checked all the boxes. It's not, because of the color of your skin or the type of music you're playing or that you might speak out or something. This should be, it's just a process to make sure that the patrons and the owners and the building, when I say the owners, the entertainment company and the people who work for them are safe. And I think that was the original intent, but again, I wasn't there in 2012, so I'm looking forward to talking to former council member Conti. Thank you so much. I didn't mean to put you on the spot.
It's okay, you're welcome.
You really gave us a lot of information. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councilmember Flynn, you want to say something?
I think I had a question too about the Armory. Was there something about it was designated as an auditorium? Did they need, so they needed, can you go into that? Because I heard some legal information.
I don't know that I can go into that. I know exactly what I know generally
Okay.
what you're talking about,
Yeah.
but I have to look at those. I'm happy to circulate whatever documents.
Gotcha, all right, thank you.
I think it may be, in order of a means of getting around, having the inability to take it away, we've been putting them in a different classification or something to that effect, that I think they inevitably won that case. There was some legal action there.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Hyde? Clark?
Brad, just a quick question. So you talked about the zoning board of appeals previously. Do these businesses have to go before the planning board for any sort of review, or they're permitted as of right? Just thinking from a
Not
perspective of
typically,
of
I
planning,
think
yeah.
that most of the language referring to live music was moved out of the zoning ordinance into the licensing system, but there are some cases where a bar that's located in like a neighborhood residential district or a neighborhood commercial district adjacent to a neighborhood would get a conditional use approval from the planning board, but the music wouldn't really be a consideration because again, that's regulated through the cabaret process.
Yeah, just thinking outside, if the cabaret license didn't exist, if a business is already going to the planning board for a conditional use permit, taking a look at that and hours of operation and that sort of thing seems like, instead of, forcing conditional use permit plus the license, that things could be addressed with one board, potentially.
Maybe half the establishments that would go before a board maybe it would cover half of the establishments that have live music, so it would be sort of inconsistent in that some would have to go through that process and some wouldn't necessarily. And I think the goal here would be to have a more objective process. I think, having objective standards that are applied fairly to everyone, regardless of what that system is. I think that the current law in some cases is a little too subjective in that. It asks people to review it, but doesn't necessarily tell them what they're reviewing. I think it should be more specific, whatever comes out of this.
Gotcha. And then just a general question for the group. If there's a certain number of people, does it ever rise to the level of needing a special events permit, or that's totally removed, right? Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Adams? No.
For me, it's just right now, just trying to gauge everyone's perspective in regards to the cabaret license, whether you feel like it's a public safety concern, whether it's a concern about the music or the crowd, right? It's just trying to figure out what's, or not the crowd, but the process and how this is being done. Whether, because again, for what we're trying to speak to is that we're just trying to make sure that places are able to have music, right? That's just a simple thing. Public safety in regards to having the cabaret license in effect, again, from what we have seen, it does not correlate. So if the public safety aspect of what people think the cabaret license was supposed to do is not actually doing what it was intended to do or can show that it has been effective, then we should take the public safety part out of this, because again, that is dealing with APD. If a business owner has an issue at their business that requires police attention, that's APD. And APD has their process of how they will do things. We don't need to over-police the business owners. Now, if it's a process issue of just how this process is being done, how many people does the application have to go through, the timeline for the responses, then that is a whole separate conversation, which then I think that should be the focus of this conversation, is if it's the process, then okay, to our clerk's point a few moments ago, shortening the time, but making sure that the people who are involved in approving these applications are also being held accountable for getting them turned in on time, because again, as we just heard, that is the issue. It's the time it takes for them to have to approve things, to be able to do things. So again, if we're gonna focus on the process, let's then start talking about what we're open to, what we're not open to, unless we're all okay with the appeal, which we are, because again, the intended consequences of the cabaret license has shown that it's not useful. And if there is a better way to do it, which I don't disagree that there is, I just prefer a repeal. The conversation on the table is to say, how can we expedite this process and make it efficient and fair, where people here, the city clerk and her staff, are not overwhelmed of having to do more work. The other departments, commissioners, whoever else have to sign off, APD, fire department, they're actually being responsive and getting it done on time. The fact that we have to legislate that is a problem. To have to put that in legislation to say you have to respond to this in a certain amount of days, it's kind of unnecessary. I feel like it's unnecessary. Let's just, again, extend the opportunity, the chance to repeal this, to show how things could look or would have looked if we did not interrupt nightlife and businesses here in the city of Albany. And at that time, again, if it's an issue with the process, because we feel things are leading down a wrong path, then let's come back to the table and finish the conversation that we're having as to the process in itself. Meanwhile, the clerk's office and the other departments, the council, can still brainstorm on possible ways to create a better process. That's just my personal point of view. But to kind of reiterate back to Councilwoman Zamer's question, from the legislation, the intent behind it was just to create a process for approval of live music. It was just as simple as that. It's just a process to have things approved and know where things were happening at. Again, we have all that information already, where the businesses are, their hours of operation. We have a noise ordinance. Businesses know, what time they're supposed to cut it off. We don't need to over-police the situation. We need to kind of lax things just a little bit and give people the opportunity to grow their businesses. I'm turning it back over.
Thank you, Councilmember Adams. Just for give people a amount of time, we're going to allow David Gallen to go speak, then Councilmember Anani, and then I'm going to ask that the two letters that were submitted, the letter from former Councilmember Conti, as well as the letter from Jason Peters, be read into the record. I feel comfortable allowing both letters to be read since it's a pro and a con letter. I think that's fair, and I want to make sure that if their statements, they wanted their statements to be part of the public, that we give them that opportunity. So, Mr. Gowan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to the businesses that, the representatives of the businesses who came out this evening to speak in support of what you perceived as hurdles and challenges with the cabaret permit process. And clearly, there is room for great improvement based on what was shared this evening with some of the delays that were communicated in the periods of time that people wait to receive feedback, or why they're denied, and that they're denied and not exactly, they're not told why. Obviously, that's not acceptable, and I think that's part of, I think we can all agree that that is something that needs to be rectified. The thing that Councilmember Conti, former Councilmember Conti, pointed out in his note, and I think that goes to Councilmember Zamer's question, is that originally this change was made, and what Brad had also mentioned was because there was a very unclear process, and there was an effort to make a clearer process. But one of the other things that that Councilmember Conti mentions, that we'll hear about in a minute when this is read into the record, is that the cabaret ordinance, as it currently stands, sought to strike, this is Councilmember Conti's words, sought to strike a balance between commercial interests seeking to provide musical entertainment and residential neighborhoods that were in proximity to a commercial use. And I just happened to put Brad on the spot and can't think of any other way that there would be a notification to a council member, to a neighborhood, or to anyone in the city as to whether or not a business is allowed to have live music. And I think that's part of this process was for transparency and for notification. So I think there's obviously some competing interests. The one thing I want to point out is that when the clerk's office went back and looked at some of the number of permits that have been issued over the last few years, there was a doubling. In 2022, there were 13 permits issued. In 2023, there were 22 permits issued. And as of this year, there are 46. So I just want to state for the record, while crime is going down, it is an objective fact that crime is going down, and an objective fact that the number of permits are going up. So I agree that, that we don't know if there is a correlation, but those are the two facts in front of us. I think the point being that everyone wants to make it easier for business to succeed. I think we want to make sure that the businesses that are applying for these use permits are given an answer in a timely fashion. I know in the past we've adjusted permit periods such as ROPs to make them longer because they are onerous and they are time consuming. So again, I think there's a balance there, and I certainly want to point out that while there's definitely business representation here this evening, other than Councilmember Conti's statement, I don't think we have any neighborhood representation in any of the input as far as I'm aware. So I just want to point all that out by way of saying I think that there's a broader conversation here that where we can get to a better process that works for everybody. And I think that we share that goal, and that's kind of what the common thread that I've heard this evening is people want a more a clearer, more defined, and more responsive process to allow for live entertainment in the city. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Councilmember Anani?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to the business owners who, I know what it's like to be a business owner in the city of Albany. It is not easy. I know there's some people like, oh, entrepreneurs, you know, you work X amount of hours and you make X amount of dollars. Some people work 24 hours, and some of the business owners that I talk to, they're always around the clock working. It's not easy being an entrepreneur in the city of Albany. And when it comes to this issue, particularly everything that we have heard from some of the owners, the residents that are in here, is that we really need to revisit it and look at it, because if there's some racial undertone to it, that need to be discussed and that need to be corrected. I mean, this is not just something that was said from bar owners who just represent the little wards or that demographic. This is bar owners from everywhere, and there were individuals who were in here. And to see the diversity in our attendance of people that spoke is just moving in itself. I look at this issue is that what type of city do we want to live in, right? What kind of city do we want to live in? And I think that's the question that all of us should take. I agree, there are some ways that we have to hold owners accountable that are not doing the right thing. But that accountability is done through the state liquor authority. I just don't believe that the city of Albany should be in the business of, stalling businesses who are trying to apply and open, particularly to have live music, especially if live music is not the cause of public safety concerns that so many people are saying. So again, when people say that there is no accountability, there is accountability for the owners, particularly with their state liquor license process. I think that I want to thank the business owners who are here today because, again, there's a lot on your plate, and you came here. It's probably cost you some money to be here, and it's great that you're here because we need to hear from the business owners on this issue. There are business owners who's going above and beyond to make sure that their spaces are safe, not just for the patrons, but also for the neighborhood. I see sometimes even bar owners that are, after they close, they're cleaning across the street of their businesses. They donate into, some of the nonprofits in our city. They're figuring out ways that they could give back into the city. And I think that we need to be pro-business in this city. A lot of businesses are closing, and I think this will be a good PR for the city to kind of let entrepreneurs know that we're a business-friendly community. In the Pine Hills neighborhood, we also have businesses that are closing. I remember when Chris Pratt was talking about Pearl Street Pub. Pearl Street, I remember it used to be the place to be, and you have an officer right there. You go have fun, you go home. What we're seeing right now when it comes to public safety, you cannot have 3 or 4 African-American bars, right? Because again, individuals want different places to go to. And that's why even some of the bars, one bar is closed, and everybody in the city of Albany is going to one bar. Ultimately, they're going to see somebody that they might have disputes with, etc. The reason why we don't have that in other demographics is because there's so many different bars that they could go to. So they're not ultimately going to see one another. I believe that this is the right thing to do, and I want to thank the sponsors, and the bar, the owners, and the residents who, speaking loud and clear. If we want to be a business community, we need to make sure that it's less restrictions, less regulations, and really open the city back up. So, thank you.
Thank you, Councilman Anani. And so we're going to have the 2 letters read again. One is pro and one is con. And then after that, we will adjourn the meeting. Councilmember Adams, do you want to say something? Sure. I'll let you go first.
Excuse me. Thank you. So I'm on Instagram Live recording the video. That way people can hear the testimonies, the things of what's happening, and people are pouring in, expressing even more of their stories of what's been happening. One of them just being, and look how simple and crazy this is. Mr. Good Vibes downtown is one of the dispensaries that just opened up, only been open for a few months. Codes went there and shut them down because on a Friday evening, 7, 8 o'clock, they were just playing music in their venue just as customers come in. It wasn't a party, it wasn't anything. It was just music being played, and they shut them down for the day. That's a whole separate business. And they just wanted to play music in their business while they're working. This is the thing that I'm not understanding, why music seems to be such a difficult thing for people to accept. It is just music inside of a place. You play music in your car, we play music at work, we play music in all different spaces. For us to have to be allowed to be able to play music in a space is crazy. Why do you need to be allowed to play music? The music is not hurting anyone. The music is not disturbing anything inside a business that's operating as a business. Like, again, I just continue to believe that based on hearing more stories from these business owners, that this law is doing more hurt than it is good. And it's simply on the topic of music. This is just about music. This is not about public safety. If this is about public safety, this will be in public safety committee. We'll be discussing ways to make public safety improved for our businesses. But this is not what we're discussing about. We're discussing music being played in a business. Are we okay with music being played in a business? Are we? Do you feel better when you go into a business and you hear some music being played while you sit down? Is it a problem to have a live guitarist or someone for an open mic or for a karaoke? This really shouldn't be this difficult for us to like come together on and decide this doesn't make sense. Again, we agree that there's better ways to, again, focus on the process, but we should all agree that this is something that has to be addressed and that it's not needed. That's just my opinion, but again, I think we're hearing too many stories and hearing too many instances where this law is hurting and hindering people more than it's helping our city. So I'm just hoping as we continue to have more dialogue, more conversations, that you guys will continue to have an open mind as to where this direction is going to go, but hopefully it's a repeal. So that's it. I just thought that was crazy.
Thank you. I don't know, I don't think that has that issue is has to do with this specific license. That might be a state regulation. I'm not aware. But I do agree one thing. I think we need to get some more information. I think we need...
Literally said it's because they do not have a cabaret cabaret license. Literally the only reason, it has nothing to do with anything else besides this city telling them because they don't have a cabaret license, they have to close. And we heard the same similar thing to one of the other business owners right here. So it's a real thing.
Okay.
Sorry.
Well, I just want to say, I think we have to, there's been a lot, I think we need to have codes on the table. I think we need to be fair and allow codes to explain the reasons behind the decisions that they make. I want to be balanced. We've got a department that we have put in very difficult positions, and we have asked this department to do some very difficult work. So I think we have an obligation to have them around the table to have those conversations with us before we put judgments. So I look forward to that meeting in the future. Again, I want to make sure these two letters get read into the public comments. And again, one is a pro and one's a con, so I feel comfortable with that. And after that, I will ask for a motion to adjourn. Okay? Brian.
Just for clarity, would you like me to read the letter from Richard Conte first, or the Albany Restaurant Association? All right.
Let's do...
Whichever you got first.
Look, no, I'm going to do it based on which ones came in on the time period. Based on when the time came in, Richard Conte's would be read first, and then Jason's. That's because Richard Conte came in yesterday, Jason's came in today. We're going to be consistent. Thank you.
Sorry, for the record, who got this letter? Like, who did it go to?
It went to committee members.
Thank you.
So Mr. Conte's letter went to committee members. I just asked this evening to have that letter printed and shared with all members that are here so that everyone has it. And Brian, if you don't mind sharing that, both letters with all members, just so that the full body has it. Thank you.
Will do. All right, this is the memorandum from former Councilmember Richard Conte. I'm writing with regard to the above referenced ordinance, which is on the committee's 9/10/24 agenda for consideration. The measure would repeal Albany's existing cabaret ordinance outright. By way of background, I was a member of the Common Council in 2012 when the current ordinance was adopted and involved in discussions prior to its adoption. The initial ordinance was introduced in January 2010. Before final adoption in March 2012, there was extensive discussion and refinement. Contrary to popular belief, prior to adoption of the cabaret ordinance, there was no standard or uniform mechanism to authorize amplified musical entertainment at establishments. Under the zoning ordinance at the time, amplified or live music was not a defined use. Establishments that engaged in musical entertainment were considered nightclubs, which were limited to certain zoning districts. Establishments that did provide musical entertainment were either considered grandfathered or possibly had some kind of zoning authorization, use variance, or special use permit, which was rare. Or, more frequently, were providing musical entertainment without authorization, but there was no enforcement from the city. The situation had gotten out of hand, with growing conflicts between residential uses, abutting commercial uses, and other public safety concerns, and the city was reluctant to shut down establishments without a process in place to authorize musical entertainment. That is how the cabaret ordinance came about. The purpose of the cabaret ordinance was to expand the availability of musical entertainment through a uniform and transparent process that was available to commercial establishments. It was explicitly decided to use a licensure process rather than a land use approach through zoning. The license for musical entertainment was deliberately designed to go with the owner of the establishment, and if ownership changed, unlike a land use authorization, the license ceased and needed to be applied for by the new owner. There are some misconceptions I've seen about the cabaret ordinance, the most frequent being the approval process. Let's be clear. Under the plain language of the ordinance, common council members, BIDs, and neighborhood associations do not have veto authority over an application. Applications are provided to these entities for information purposes and their right to comment, but their approval or assent is not required. The only departments where approval of an application is required are planning, police, fire, buildings, and law. These departments are charged with reviewing an application solely for items within their jurisdiction, i.e. fire might look at fire code issues, buildings and occupancy or soundproofing, etc. The cabaret ordinance sought to strike a balance between commercial interests seeking to provide musical entertainment and residential neighborhoods that were in proximity to a commercial use. It's been 12 years since the ordinance was adopted. I'm sure there can be some review of its implementation and streamlining of the application process, especially with renewals, but I do believe that the best approach to expanding the availability of musical entertainment is through a licensure approach versus a land use approach. If the council decides to repeal the cabaret ordinance outright, you need to also examine the zoning ordinance and what would occur lest you fall prey to unintended consequences. As someone who lived through the pre-cabaret adoption, I can only begin to imagine what might occur. I've tried to lay down some brief perspective in this memo. My recommendation is to look at the existing ordinance and its operation and how you might streamline it if necessary, but not to repeal it. If you decide you want to go in a land use direction, you need to examine the existing zoning ordinance and how that might work, and take your time. I value a vibrant and balanced nightlife. That's what we were seeking to achieve in 2012. The following is a letter in support from the Albany Restaurant Association. Dear Common Council members, I'm writing to you on behalf of the Albany Restaurant Association to formally request the repeal of the cabaret license law currently in effect within our city. This legislation, no matter how well-intentioned it might have originally been, has increasingly become a barrier to the growth and vibrancy of our local bars, restaurants, and entertainment community. Economic impact. Our restaurants, hospitality, and entertainment venues are integral to Albany's cultural and economic landscape and are part of the foundation upon which we will build the future success of our city. They not only provide valuable services and amenities to residents and visitors alike, but also contribute significantly to the city's tax revenue and employment. The current cabaret license law imposes unnecessary burdens on these establishments and has historically served to discourage them from offering live music or other entertainment. Cultural enrichment. The presence of live music and entertainment is a key component of a vibrant, dynamic community. These cultural activities enrich the city's atmosphere and help foster a sense of community. They also attract visitors, enhancing Albany's reputation as a lively and engaging place to live and work. By repealing the cabaret license law, the city can and will effectively encourage more venues to host live performances and events, contributing to a richer cultural tapestry and a more appealing destination for both residents and tourists. Regulatory burden. The existing cabaret license requirements are restrictive, cumbersome, redundant, and unnecessary. The current process of obtaining a license includes the approval of no less than 5 city departments: police, fire, buildings, and regulatory compliance, planning, and the city clerk, paperwork, license fees, a public hearing, and multiple inspections when the same outcome could already be effectively achieved through other existing regulations. Sound ordinances already exist. Inspections are already required to open any business. Fire department inspections are already required before a certificate of occupancy can be issued. Removing cumbersome and redundant processes in favor of a simpler regulatory framework allows bar and restaurant owners to spend more time focusing on their core business operations and how they can bring new and exciting live music to our city. In conclusion, repealing the cabaret license law would be a progressive step toward fostering a more dynamic, economically vibrant, and culturally enriched Albany. It would support local businesses, enhance the city's appeal, and align with contemporary practices that prioritize growth and community engagement over outdated regulatory constraints.
Okay, thank you. And I want to thank everyone again for coming out today on this issue. And I want to thank those who wrote in for their opinions. Do I have a motion for adjournment?
Motion to adjourn?
Okay. Second.
I just want to hopefully we can have the next meeting very quickly and expeditiously so we can hopefully get through this process. Thank you.
I hope so too. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, everybody, again. Thank you.